Okay, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about my top 10 favorite movies of 2020. Now, in order for a movie to be eligible for this list, it not only had to have come out in 2020, but I also had to have watched it in 2020. Any movies that came out before this year that I happened to watch this year will not be eligible for the list. I already did my top 10 worst movies of the year, so if you haven't watched that, I'll leave a link in the description down below. Just a couple of disclaimers that I want to give for this video. I'm not talking about any documentaries. I did watch quite a few documentaries this year, but I feel like when people click on a top 10 movie list, they just want to hear about the kind of Hollywood movies. So no documentaries on this list. Also, just in an effort to keep this video a little bit shorter than the last one, I'm not going to be going really deep into any plot points. That way, if any of you watching haven't watched any of these movies yet, you can go into them fresh. I just want to really talk about things I liked, things I didn't like, without talking about the plots all that much. I do want to start by just giving a quick honorable mention to the film Extraction. The guy who directed this movie was one of the main stunt coordinators for a lot of the Marvel movies, and it's clear that this guy knows what he's doing when it comes to directing stunts and action. The action in this movie was some of the best I've seen all year. The only downfall to this movie was that the plot was pretty generic. It was, it's a plot that you've seen before, and that kind of brought it down for me, but it was good enough that I wanted to give it an honorable mention. But jumping into the actual list, starting with number 10, is the movie Palm Springs. This is the latest sort of reimagining, retelling of the tale of people getting stuck reliving the same day over and over again. And it was fine. Andy Samberg was good. J.K. Simmons is in this movie, and he's never made a movie worse by being in it. The chemistry between all the actors was great. And there's sort of kind of a little plot twist at the end, which kind of recontextualizes the whole film. So Palm Springs was good. If you have Hulu, give it a watch. Number 10 on my list. Moving on to number 9 is the Borat subsequent movie film. And I don't know if there's much that I can say about this movie. This movie exists basically to just make fun of all the crap that happened in 2020, which was much needed. I don't think this movie was as good as the first Borat, but that movie was sort of lightning in a bottle. But this movie was fine for being a sequel to a well-known and beloved movie. So Borat, subsequent movie film, coming in at number 9 on my list. Speaking of movies that came out that were pretty well timed in terms of release, was Da 5 Bloods. This one was a Spike Lee movie. Some of the themes that are touched on in this movie include, racial justice and equality, as well as the treatment of war veterans, both of which are issues that are prevalent in society today. I think the film does an okay job kind of juggling between those two themes, as well as the main plot, which is sort of different to those two things. There are some scenes in this movie where I was like, I can't watch this. This is too intense. I have no idea what's going to happen. One of the actors in this movie, Delroy Lindo, is getting a lot of Oscar hype for his performance, and I agree. There's a couple scenes in this movie where he's just really impressive and kind of carries the film. So for those reasons, I have Da 5 Bloods at number 8 on my list. Number 7 on my list is a film that has to do with the field that I currently work in, so it kind of touched home a little bit, and that is Bad Education. Hugh Jackman is great in this movie, also getting some Oscar praise. Everyone in this movie is great. It's funny. It's based on a true story, and so when you watch it, you're kind of wondering, like, how could this have happened? It's just a good performances all around, a good watch, and so Bad Education, number 7 on my list. Number 6 on my list was probably the movie that gave me the most difficulty in terms of ranking it, and that is Tenet. I love Christopher Nolan movies. I was disappointed that I wasn't able to watch this in theaters because movie theaters where I live weren't open at the time, and so it was a difficult task to try to avoid spoilers for 5 or so months until I could finally watch this movie. The first time I watched this movie, I watched it on a TV, and for several reasons, it was very hard to follow. First of all, it's just a generally confusing movie. The plot is very kind of convoluted. And a common issue that a lot of people have been having with this movie is it's really hard to hear the actors in a lot of scenes. Like if two actors are talking in a scene, they're both talking really quietly, and the kind of sound effects and other noise in the scene tends to be too loud, and you can only pick up like a couple words every now and then, enough that you can follow what's going on, but you definitely feel that you're missing some key details. So by the time I finished watching this movie for the first time, for several reasons, I was like, I think I watched it, but I need to watch it again because I didn't hear a lot of stuff, and also it's just a confusing Christopher Nolan movie. The second time I watched this movie, I watched it on my iPad with headphones in, full blast, and it was a completely different experience. I was able to hear all of the dialogue. There were definitely things that I missed the first time, and it was just a little bit easier to follow the plot, what was going on. It's an enjoyable Christopher Nolan movie. Is it his best? Probably not. It's super, super confusing. I think a little bit more so than some of his others. Again, I mentioned the issues with some of the sound. I would definitely recommend watching this with headphones in, kind of by yourself, if you really want to get the full experience. But Tenet, I really, really enjoyed, so it's at number 6 on my list. Number 5 on my list is Soul. This was the last movie I think that I watched this year. This was a Disney Pixar movie. I didn't know a lot about the plot going in. I think I had watched one trailer. So about 30 minutes into the movie, I was like, okay, I watched the trailer. This is kind of what I was expecting. But then something happens that I did not see. It might have been in a trailer that I just didn't watch. So it was refreshing to not have that have been revealed to me in a trailer. This movie deals with some pretty mature themes. I actually don't think a lot of kids who watch this movie are going to kind of connect with it. I do think it's a movie more for adults. With that being said, I usually do get, I don't cry a lot during movies, but I do get emotional. And I expected to get a little bit more emotional out of this movie. And by the end, I was like, oh, it's a good message, but I'm not close to crying. I'm not super emotional. It resonated with me, but just not as much as a different Disney Pixar movie, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But Soul was a great movie. That's why I have it number 5 on my list. Number 4 on my list is probably not a movie that would have made it on the list if it wasn't 2020 because of a lot of movie cancellations, and that was The Gentleman. This was the second movie I saw in theaters this year. One of two. I saw 2 at the beginning. The first 20 minutes or so of this movie are a little bit confusing just because of how the plot is presented to you. It's kind of confusing to figure out what's going on, but then once you understand how the structure of the movie is working, it's a really enjoyable movie. I like this movie because it's one where you might have 2 characters talking to each other, both of which are talking about an experience they just have had. And one character talks about his perspective of what happened. And when he's done, the other character is like, well, hold on. This is what I was doing when that was happening. And oftentimes these 2 characters are kind of on the opposite side, one's kind of good, one's kind of bad. And it's nice to see just the different perspectives in this movie. It's not just one straightforward storyline. You get to see the different perspectives. And so I really like that as well. So The Gentleman is at number 4 on my list. Number 3 on my list is The Trial of the Chicago 7. Aaron Sorkin, who wrote and directed this movie, is pretty known for quick dialogue, witty dialogue, humor, and this movie had all of that, which I really appreciate. I like that a lot. The historical accuracy of this movie, has kind of come into question. So if you're someone who places a lot of value on movies being historically accurate, this might not be for you, but I really enjoyed it. It was funny. It's serious. It's crazy that it's based on a true story. I should mention that. And when you watch it, you're like, I can't believe some of this stuff actually happened. So The Trial of the Chicago 7, number 3 on my list. At number 2, I mentioned there was a Disney Pixar movie that I liked more than Soul, and that was Onward. This movie was funny. It was creative. It hit all the right emotional beats throughout. And the ending is not really what I expected. You kind of, as the movie's going on, you expect it to go one way, but then when we reach kind of the climax, something else happens completely, and that really got to me. It was an emotional ending I was not expecting, and it affected me more than Soul, which I talked about earlier. So that's why I have Onward at number 2 on my list. But number 1, my favorite movie of the year. The first movie I saw in theaters this year, and that was 1917. Now, technically, 1917 had a very limited release in 2019, and then it had its wide, just kind of general theater release in January of 2020. So that's what I'm considering. It came out in 2020. This movie was great. The way it's shot and edited, which I won't spoil for you now, it's like watching a horror movie where every single second something might happen. Just the way it's shot and filmed, like I said, you're tense as an audience member watching the entire time. The cinematography is great. I think it deservingly won Best Cinematography at the Oscars. The acting is great. The ending of this movie just punches you in the gut for a couple different reasons. It's the most beautiful movie I've seen in a long time, and that's why I have it at number one on my list, 1917, the best movie of 2020. So there it is, my top 10 movies of the year, the top 10 movies of 2020. I'm curious to know your thoughts, so if you disagree on any of my rankings, let me know in the comments down below. If you had other movies that you watched last year that you thought should have been on the list, let me know. I'll give them a watch and maybe we can have a dialogue in the conversation. But thank you again so much for watching, and have a great day.